Hi everybody, I'm Phil Tobias. Welcome to Family Footnotes. Today is March 16th, 2021, and we're going to be talking about the early history of the Tobias family as written down by Jason Edson Tobias of Battle Creek. So, here we go.
Jason wrote down the family history from conversations he had with Ezra Tobias, his father. Ezra was born in 1801 and lived until 1899. As you can see, here's the beginning of it. Daniel Tobias, father of Ezra Tobias Sr., was born in Scotland, served in the War of 1789, was wounded, and later was badly wounded by a bear and died when Ezra Tobias Sr. was 8 years old, his mother dying when he was 3 years old. 8 boys and 2 girls were born to them as follows: James, Jason, Sarah, Daniel, Alonzo, Alzenia, Henry, Charles, Frank, and Ezra. We do know that Daniel Tobias served in the Revolutionary War, so I don't know if the 1789 is a mistranscription of that. And we do not know Ezra's mother's name from this document. We later found out that it was Mercy Hannah Fitch. Here's one of the very few pictures we have of Ezra and Laura Tobias. This was taken probably around 1885. On the left, we have their youngest daughter, Lily. Sitting in the first chair here is Laura. Second chair is Ezra. Notice at their feet there is a animal of some kind. I'm going to say it's a dog because I like dogs, but they probably had cats too. And if we look up here on the left above Lily's head, we see a bird cage. So it's interesting to note that the Tobiases liked animals. Standing here holding his hand on the pillar is Will. And then finally, here's Jason, my particular ancestor. A lot of the folks who attend the Tobias family reunions are descended from Will, and unfortunately, Lily had only one daughter, Margaret, and she passed away when she was in her 40s without having any children. Here we are in Scotland. This is where Daniel Tobias is supposed to be from. We found other evidence that suggests he's from New York, so that's all up for debate still. That's not a certain thing. The thing about oral histories is that sometimes they are really accurate and sometimes they are not. So we always have to be open to trying to verify the actual facts. Trust but verify is a very handy phrase for not only accounting but also for genealogy. Moving on to Bath, so imagine this trip taken across the ocean in a wood ship, and then ending up here in Bath, New York. This is where Ezra was born, and this general area. You'll see around it Interstate 86, that's called the Southern Tier Expressway. I highly recommend taking that route if you ever go to New York, and it's a beautiful, beautiful area. We actually saw a bald eagle flying next to the highway when we were going through here. Ezra Tobias Sr. was born near Bath in Seneca County, New York, January 20th, 1801. His mother died when he was only 3 years old, his father when but 8 years old, and he being the youngest in the family, his 7 older brothers and 2 sisters had scattered to shirk for themselves, so he was left to do the same at that tender age. He had no shoes, and when he went to school in winter, he used to carry a long staved shingle, and when his feet got too cold running through the snow, he would lay the shingle down and stand on it until his feet were warm, and then pick it up and run on. When only 12 years old, he got a job driving a horse on a canal running through the southern part of New York and Pennsylvania, the same canal that President James A. Garfield worked on a number of years. In 1822, when he was 21 years old, he married Miss Amelia Davis of Steuben County, New York, and they moved to Ashtabula County, Ohio in 1830, then to Lucas County, Ohio, where his wife died on February 5th, 1846, leaving 5 children, Ezra Jr. being the baby, and having lost 3 by death during their married life. My understanding is that Amelia died during the birth of Ezra Jr. Here is a picture of the canal system through New York. It's a little later than the time period he was actually working there, But you can see as you go down near Chemung County and Steuben County that there are canal systems attaching to the bigger ones, and those are the kinds of areas he would have worked in, as well as the ones down here in Pennsylvania. Here's a picture of the Ohio and Erie Canal, and you'll notice the gentleman riding the horse. That's the kind of job that Ezra Tobias had. He was towing the horse. This is Steuben County, New York, where Ezra and Amelia Tobias were married. You'll notice that Bath is currently in Steuben County, where previously it had been in Seneca County. Ultimately, they moved to the Andover area, and that's in Ashtabula County, Ohio. You'll find traces of them in the tax records and the census records there. And also, there's a lot of the descendants of Jason Ordell Tobias, who's Ezra's older brother, buried in the Andover Union Township Cemetery. And that is a very old cemetery. You can find it on findagrave.com. And it's interesting to check out the various headstones, particularly the ones of our family relatives there. Moving on to Lucas County. Again, a long journey across the state. You wonder if they went by boat or whether they went by land. It was usually a lot quicker to go by boat. Lucas County is where Amelia dies, and she apparently died in childbirth for Ezra Jr. He then went on to marry Laura Edson, and that's the next part of this tale. On April 17, 1847, he married Laura Edson, an orphan girl only 15 years old, when in 1851 they moved to Michigan near Adrian, where they lived 2 years, Millie being born there. In 1853, they came to Baltimore, Berry County, Michigan, with their 6 children. Here they purchased 40 acres of land of heavy timber, about an acre being cleared, where they rolled up a log house to live in and a log barn for their oxen and cow. Then came the cutting, the timber, great big white wood, ash and basswood trees that are so expensive now, and rolling them up in great big log heaps with the oxen, and at night they would work until after 11 o'clock firing them. In about 1 year after they got settled, they purchased 50 acres more adjoining the 40, making them 90 acres where he lived, until he died on October 22nd, 1899, at the age of 98 years, 9 months, and 2 days, he being blind about 18 years before his death. This is the census record from 1850, so they're slightly off there on the timing. This is in Dover, the township of Dover, in Leewinak County, Michigan, and it's the 20th day of July, 1850. Now, on the previous page to this, so the very last listing is Ezra Tobias, and here we have Laura at the top, and she's listed as Philura Tobias with a F-Y, then L-U-R-A. And next is Lorenzo, and it's interesting to me that, basically kids are being recorded here by some by their middle name, some by their first name. Next, very hard to read, is Frederick C. Tobias. And then this almost looks like Joshua. I know Carmen's middle name is Joseph, but this is Carmen. And next is Betsy Jane Tobias. And then finally is Ezra Alonzo Tobias. And below him, one that's really hard to read is Philura A. Tobias. And I think that's Amelia Philura Tobias. I think what they did with her name was actually combine the names of his first wife and his second wife, which was really a generous thing. If you go over to the right-hand side here, under place of birth, you can see that Laura was born in Vermont, and then Lorenzo, the first child, was born in New York. The second child, Frederick, was born in New York, and then starting with Carmen, Betsy, and Ezra Jr., they are all born in Ohio. Amelia is listed here as being born in Ohio. The family moves from Lucas County, heading up to Dover Township in Leelanau County. They spent about 2 years there, and then they head out to Baltimore Township in Berry County, Michigan. All right. I believe they were probably centered around the area of Dowling. He showed his Scotch descent, being 6 feet and 2 inches tall, and weighed 150 pounds in his younger days. He and his true and faithful wife experienced many hardships in those pioneer days, Bristol being the nearest neighbor 2 miles south, and Green family the nearest neighbors 2 miles north, and nothing but a wilderness between them, with bears, wolves, and panthers having possession of the forests. The nearest railroad station was Detroit, where he had to take his wheat and corn to have it ground with a yoke of oxen and a lumber wagon, which would take 5 or 6 days to make the trip. Sometimes the wife and children would have nothing, only whole corn and salt to eat before he got back. Later there was a railroad built through Battle Creek, also a grist mill, so they used to leave the younger children in the care of the older ones, and then they would start for Battle Creek after it began to get cool at night, and get in there as the merchants were opening their stores in the morning, sell their butter, eggs, and produce, and do their trading during the day, while the oxen were resting and starting back home at night, arriving in the morning, as the oxen could not stand the heat of the daytime. So we went from Baltimore Township all the way down to Detroit, where the railroad station is. And I just picked Michigan Central Railroad as a great example of what this looked like there. In later years, they were able to go to Battle Creek, and that's obviously quite a bit closer. Again, here's the railroad station. Take a quick look at that. I don't know if that's where it's always been. Maybe the station was in a different spot back in the day. Here we'll pull back and see Battle Creek a bit. And then as we move a little bit north, I'm going to have to pull out a bit here. There we go. You can see how close it is to Dowling. The final resting place of both Ezra and Laura Tobias and many of their children and grandchildren is the Dowling Cemetery in Dowling, Michigan. And it's located about a couple miles north of Dowling. It's well worth the trip. Here's Ezra Tobias and his family, our final entry here. We have his children by Amelia Davis, Henry, Charles, Carmen, Betsy Jane, and Ezra. We have his children by Laura Edson, Millie, Marilla, Emmeline, Jason, Willie, and Lily. You'll notice I've written out their full names on the right in the box, just so you can compare them to what you might have heard in the family histories. I'd like to end with a picture of 2 portraits that were made of Ezra Tobias and Laura Edson. It's always fun to look at these and to see if we have family members currently who resemble these folks. Thanks very much for joining me today, and I look forward to reading any comments or questions you have below. Thanks a lot.